There is a book that has outlasted every empire, a collection of prayers so ancient, so deeply woven into the spiritual fabric of humanity, that kings whispered them in the dark, slaves sang them in chains, and mothers read them over sleeping children for thousands of years. That book is the Book of Psalms, and within its 150 songs, there is a handful of passages so charged with spiritual power, so specifically aimed at the forces of lack and poverty, that mystics, rabbis, priests, and healers across centuries have pointed to them and said, "This is where the breakthrough begins." Today we are going to talk about one of those psalms. We are going to go deep into its meaning, its history, its spiritual mechanics, and the very real documented testimonies of people whose lives changed after they connected sincerely with its words. We are going to talk about what poverty really is at a spiritual level, why a psalm can move financial mountains, and how a single sincere reading, done properly, with understanding and intention, can begin a transformation in your home that unfolds within 24 hours. Before we begin, I want to make something clear. This is not superstition. This is not folk magic. This is ancient wisdom about the relationship between the spoken word, sincere intention, the human heart, and the invisible forces that govern material reality. Every major spiritual tradition on earth, from Kabbalistic Judaism to Christian mysticism, from Sufi Islam to African spiritual traditions, from Hindu Vedantic philosophy to indigenous shamanic practice, every single one of them teaches the same thing, that words spoken with faith and understanding are among the most powerful tools a human being possesses. And the Psalms, particularly Psalm 23 and Psalm 91, which we will discuss today, are not ordinary words. They are what the ancient Hebrew tradition called devarim, things, realities. Because in Hebrew thought, the word does not describe reality. The word creates it. So let us begin at the beginning. What is poverty really? Before a psalm can remove something from your home, you need to understand what that something actually is. Most people, when they hear the word poverty, think immediately of money, or rather the absence of money. Empty bank accounts, unpaid bills, bare refrigerators. And yes, all of that is real. The pain of material lack is real, and we must never minimize it. But the great spiritual teachers throughout history have always pointed to something deeper. Poverty, at its root, is not a financial condition. Poverty is a spiritual frequency. It is a state of consciousness, a way of seeing the world, a set of invisible beliefs that govern what a person expects, what they attract, and what they allow into their lives. Think about this for a moment. You have probably noticed that some people seem to move through life with a kind of ease around money. Things open up for them. Opportunities find them. Even when they lose everything, they somehow rebuild and rise. And you have probably also noticed the opposite. People who, no matter how hard they work, no matter how many chances come their way, seem always to end up back in the same place of lack and struggle, same income, same debt, same anxiety. Different circumstances on the outside, but the same result. The ancient wisdom traditions explain this not as luck, not as coincidence, not even primarily as systemic injustice, though that too is real, but as a frequency match. What you vibrate at, what you believe at the deepest level of your consciousness, is what the universe will consistently deliver to you. This is not a new age concept. This is a principle embedded in the oldest spiritual texts on earth. "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he," wrote the author of Proverbs. The Talmud teaches that a person is shaped by their thoughts. The Bhagavad Gita says that what a person desires in their deepest heart, that is what they become. Poverty is, first and foremost, a poverty of expectation, and that is exactly what the Psalms are designed to correct. Why psalms? Why words? Let me explain the spiritual mechanics of why a psalm, a spoken prayer, can produce real-world change. When you speak words with sincere belief and deep understanding, several things happen simultaneously. At the psychological level, you are reprogramming your subconscious mind. The subconscious mind does not understand the difference between vividly imagined reality and physical reality. It responds to the emotional weight of words. When you speak declarations of abundance, of protection, of divine provision, when you say them slowly, feelingly, with your whole being, You are literally rewriting the inner scripts that drive your behavior, your decisions, your relationship with money, your openness to opportunity. At the spiritual level, you are aligning yourself with what the Kabbalistic tradition calls the Ein Sof, the infinite source of all provision. You are removing the spiritual blockages, the klipo, the shells of negativity and fear, that stand between you and the flow of divine abundance. You are declaring to the spiritual realm that you belong to a different category of experience. You are not a person of lack. You are a child of the living God, and lack is not your inheritance. At the quantum level, and yes, modern physics has something to say here, consciousness interacts with material reality. The observer effect in quantum mechanics tells us that the act of observation, of focused conscious attention, literally changes what is observed. Words spoken with focused intention are one of the most ancient and universal forms of this principle. What you direct your consciousness toward consistently, with emotion and belief, begins to reorganize at the energetic level. That is not poetry. That is physics. And the Psalms are not random words. They are not casual prayers. They are, in the Jewish mystical tradition, combinations of divine names and sacred sounds so precisely arranged that their vibration alone, their sound, their rhythm, their structure, produces a spiritual effect independent of whether the reader fully understands every word. The Kabbalists called this the segulot, the hidden properties of the sacred text. Every letter of the Hebrew alphabet carries a specific spiritual charge. The combination of letters in certain psalms creates what the mystics described as a spiritual key, a combination that opens specific gates in the heavenly realm. And what psalm opens the gate of abundance? What psalm specifically targets the force of poverty and commands it to leave? We are going to talk primarily about Psalm 23, but we are also going to discuss Psalm 91 and Psalm 128, because together they form what the great Kabbalistic masters called the triangle of provision. 3 psalms, 3 dimensions of the same truth, 3 angles of spiritual attack against the spirit of lack. Psalm 23, the shepherd's promise. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. 6 words that have echoed across 3,000 years of human history. 6 words spoken by David, king, warrior, poet, mystic, a man who knew poverty in the fields as a shepherd boy, who knew fear in the cave hiding from enemies, who knew loss, betrayal, and grief. This was not a man writing from comfort. This was a man who had been tested in the fire and had come out knowing something most people never discover, that there is a force in this universe that is personally, intimately concerned with your well-being. And that when you align yourself with that force, truly, sincerely, in the depths of your heart, the word want loses its power over you. Let us break this psalm down line by line, because the magic is in the meaning, and meaning amplifies the power of the words 1,000 times. The Lord is my shepherd. Notice the present tense, not was, not will be, is, right now. In this moment of lack, in this moment of confusion and pressure and empty bank accounts, the living God is functioning as your personal shepherd. A shepherd in the ancient world was not a distant administrative figure. A shepherd was someone who knew each animal by name, who went out in storm and heat, who fought predators, who found water in desert places, who carried the weak ones on his own back. When David says, "The Lord is my shepherd," he is saying, I have an intimate, personal, daily relationship with the source of all provision, and that source is actively, vigilantly working on my behalf right now. I shall not want. This is a declaration, not a wish, not a hope, a declaration. And declarations carry a different spiritual weight than prayers of petition. When you petition, you are coming from a place of scarcity. Please give me what I don't have. When you declare, you are coming from a place of spiritual certainty. This is already true, I am simply acknowledging it. I shall not want means the condition of want is not compatible with my identity as a person under divine shepherding. It is not that I will not experience challenges. It is that want, fundamental, desperate, soul-crushing lack, has been disqualified from being a permanent resident in my life. He makes me lie down in green pastures. The image of green pastures is not accidental. In a dry desert land, green pastures are a miracle. They mean water is near. They mean life is abundant. The word makes me is interesting. It implies that sometimes we are so driven by fear, so caught in the panic of survival mode, that we refuse to rest. We cannot see the provision in front of us because our nervous system is locked in emergency. The shepherd, the divine intelligence, makes us lie down, forces us into peace. Because peace is the posture of receiving. You cannot receive in a state of panic. He leads me beside still waters. In Hebrew, the phrase is me menuchot, waters of rest, or waters of completion. This is not rushing, turbulent water. This is water that is calm, settled, clear. Water, in ancient spiritual symbolism, represents both life and consciousness. The divine leads you to a state of mental and spiritual clarity, a clear mind, a calm spirit, precisely because that is the state in which you can hear guidance, recognize opportunity, and make good decisions. Poverty is often perpetuated by the mental chaos of fear. The psalm leads you out of that chaos into the clarity where solutions become visible. He restores my soul. The Hebrew word for soul here is nephesh, the animating life force, the deepest self, the seat of desire and will. Poverty does not just damage the bank account, it damages the soul, it depletes the will to try, it corrupts the ability to envision something better. Repeated lack creates what psychologists call scarcity mindset, a narrowing of mental bandwidth, a loss of imagination and hope. He restores my soul is the divine counter to all of that. It is a reset, a renewal, a restoration of the spiritual vitality that poverty has been draining away. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. The paths of righteousness are not just moral paths, they are correct paths, effective paths, paths that lead somewhere, for whose sake? For his own name's sake. This means God's reputation is invested in your breakthrough. The divine itself has a stake in your flourishing. That is not a small thing. When the infinite power of the universe has committed its own name to the project of getting you to right paths, what force can ultimately stop that? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Let us be honest. Sometimes the financial situation you are in looks like the valley of the shadow of death, the calls from collectors, the fear of eviction, the shame of not being able to provide. This verse does not pretend that valley is not real. It says, even while walking through it, not around it, not above it, through it, I will fear no evil. Why? Because you are there, and your presence changes what the valley means. It is no longer a place of destruction. It is a place of passage. You are walking through, you are not stopping there, you are going through. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The rod and staff are the tools of the shepherd's trade. The staff guides and supports. The rod defends against predators. In spiritual terms, the divine wisdom that guides your decisions, and the divine power that protects you from spiritual attacks, from the forces that would rob you of your breakthrough. These are both actively present with you. You are not navigating this alone, with only your human intelligence and limited resources. You have spiritual tools working on your behalf. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. This verse is extraordinary, and it is one of the most powerful anti-poverty declarations in all of Scripture. In the presence of my enemies, meaning, while the forces of lack are still watching, while your critics are still predicting your failure, while the bills are still on the table, while the bank account is still negative, God begins to prepare a feast. Not after your enemies leave, not after the battle is over, in the presence of your enemies. The provision comes while the lack is still visible. This is the divine economy. It does not wait for perfect conditions. It creates a table in imperfect ones. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Anointing with oil in the ancient world was the ceremony of selection, of royalty, of special divine favor. This is not the anointing of a servant. This is the anointing of a chosen one. And the cup that runs over is the image of abundance so complete, so generous, that it cannot even be contained. The cup is full, yes, but it does not stop there. It runs over. Overflow. More than enough. This is the divine standard for your life that Psalm 23 declares. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. The word follow in Hebrew carries the sense of pursuit. Goodness and mercy will chase you. They will be relentless in finding you. You do not have to hunt down your blessing. Your blessing hunts you. When you align with this psalm, when you speak it with belief and understanding, you are activating this principle. The divine goodness becomes proactive. It comes after you, every day of your life, without exception. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is the destination, the permanent residence in divine presence, in divine provision, in divine peace. Not a temporary visit, not an occasional grace, forever, permanent, settled. This is the Psalm 25 sentences, 3,000 years of testimony behind it. And when you read it, truly read it, not as a ritual recitation but as a personal declaration of your identity and your divine relationship, something shifts. Something that was closed begins to open. Something that was blocked begins to flow. Psalm 91, the shield against spiritual poverty. Now, Psalm 23 addresses the supply side. It declares divine provision and abundance. But there is another dimension to poverty that many people overlook, and that is the dimension of spiritual attack. Not everyone who is poor is simply experiencing bad luck or poor decisions. Some people are fighting a battle that is not just economic. Some families carry generational patterns of poverty that are deeply spiritual in nature, what the Bible calls iniquity in the bloodline, or what African spiritual traditions call ancestral debt, or what the Kabbalists call Gilgul, the echoing of unresolved spiritual patterns across generations. For these situations, and for the general protection of your home and your provision against spiritual interference, Psalm 91 is the great shield. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. The secret place, in Hebrew, Beseta Elyon, is not a physical location. It is a state of intimate spiritual consciousness. It is the inner sanctuary of sincere communion with the divine. And the promise attached to dwelling there is shadow, the shadow of the Almighty. In a hot, merciless desert climate, shadow means life. Shadow means relief. Shadow means protection from the burning heat of adversity. When you dwell in genuine communion with God, when your spiritual life is real and not just ceremonial, you live under that shadow. The poverty that burns others cannot burn you with the same intensity because you are covered. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. Again, the declaration. Trust is the spiritual currency of protection. Fear, on the other hand, is the currency of the enemy of your provision. When you walk in fear, you open doors. When you walk in trust, not naive optimism, but deep, experiential trust based on relationship, those doors close. Poverty finds it much harder to take root in a life governed by genuine trust. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall trust. The image is a mother bird protecting her young, completely covered, every angle of attack blocked. This is the posture of spiritual protection that Psalm 91 promises to those who genuinely dwell in the secret place. If poverty is, in part, a spiritual attack, a force that pursues certain families, certain bloodlines, certain individuals with what seems like supernatural persistence, then Psalm 91 is the counterattack. It is the spiritual armor that makes you untouchable to that force. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling, your home, the very space you are reading this in right now. The force of lack, the spirit of poverty, the generational pattern of not enough. Psalm 91 declares that in the spiritual realm, these forces do not have legal authority to enter a home covered by its promises. For He shall give His angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. Provision is often not miraculous in the obvious sense. Often it comes through people who suddenly think of you, through opportunities that seem to appear from nowhere, through ideas that drop into your mind at the right moment. The ancient teaching is that these are not coincidences. These are angels, agents of divine provision, fulfilling their assignment over your life. When you read Psalm 91, you are activating that assignment. You are reminding the spiritual realm of the assignment it carries over you and your home. Psalm 128, the blessing of the home. The third psalm in this triangle of provision is Psalm 128, and this one is specifically about the blessing of the household. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you eat the labor of your hands, you shall be happy, and it shall be well with you. This psalm addresses the relationship between work, wisdom, and reward. In the biblical model, blessing is not disconnected from effort. It is the divine multiplication of honest effort. The promise here is specific. You will eat the labor of your hands. Your work will be rewarded. Your effort will not be swallowed by invisible forces. The blessing comes on your work. Your work bears fruit. Your home is full. Your wife shall be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your home. Your children like olive plants all around your table. Whether you interpret this literally or spiritually, as the metaphor of a home where the relationships are fruitful and life-giving, the image is one of abundance at the center of family life. Not a house of stress and scarcity, not a table of anxiety and shame. A table surrounded by fruitfulness, by growth, by the next generation flourishing. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. And then the psalm ends with this extraordinary phrase, may you see Jerusalem's good all the days of your life. Jerusalem, in mystical interpretation, is not just a city. It is a symbol of spiritual fulfillment of the divine blessing fully manifest in material reality. May you see that good. May you witness it in your lifetime, in your home, at your table. How to read these psalms for maximum spiritual effect. Now, here is where many people miss the power. They read the psalm the way you read a bus timetable, quickly, functionally trying to get through it. That is not how it works. That will produce nothing. If you want the full spiritual charge of these words to discharge into your life and your home, you need to approach this differently. First, prepare yourself. Before you read, take a few moments to be still. Close your eyes. Take 3 deep, slow breaths. With each exhale, consciously release the anxiety, the fear, the worry about money. You are not bringing your panic into this reading. You are bringing your faith. If your faith is small right now, that is fine. Even the size of a mustard seed, the teacher said, is enough to move mountains. You do not need great faith. You need sincere faith. There is a difference. Second, prepare the space. In the Jewish tradition, there is the concept of hachana, preparation, the idea that the quality of a spiritual act is largely determined by what happens before the act begins. Light a candle if you can. Some people use white for purity and clarity. Some use gold or yellow for prosperity. If you have sacred oil, anoint your forehead with a small amount. Wash your hands. These are not magic rituals. They are physical actions that tell your subconscious mind, what I am about to do is different from ordinary activity. I am entering a different mode, a sacred mode. Third, speak the words aloud. Do not just read them in your head, speak them. The spiritual power of the Psalms is in large part sonic. It is in the vibration of the sound moving through your body, through the air of your home, touching the walls, the corners, the rooms where your family sleeps and eats and lives. Speak clearly. Speak with intention. Speak as if every word is true, because it is. Fourth, pause on the lines that hit you. Do not rush. If you read, I shall not want, and something inside you says, but I do want, I am in want right now. Stop there. That is where your work is. Stay with that line. Say it again and again. Say it until something in you begins to shift. Say it until the declaration begins to feel more real than the fear. That shift, that is the moment the spiritual gear changes. Fifth, as you read Psalm 23, visualize what you are declaring. When you say, He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies, see it. See the table. See it full. See yourself sitting at it, not desperate, not afraid, but seated with dignity and peace. Your subconscious mind and the spiritual realm both respond to vivid, emotionally charged mental imagery combined with spoken declaration. This combination is extraordinarily powerful. Sixth, after you finish reading, spend a few minutes in thanksgiving, not for what you hope to receive, for what you already have, for the breath in your lungs, for the roof over your head, even if it is not the roof you want, for the eyes to read these words. Gratitude is one of the highest spiritual frequencies you can emit. It is the energy of abundance, and when you emit it sincerely, you attract its match. This is not sentiment. This is spiritual law. Seventh, seal the reading with a declaration over your home. Stand in the center of your home or at your front door and speak something like this. By the authority of these sacred words, I declare that the spirit of poverty and lack has no place in this home. I declare that abundance, provision, and divine blessing are the inheritance of everyone who lives within these walls. It is done. It is sealed. It is so. Then go about your day, not in anxious waiting, in quiet expectation. There is a difference. Anxious waiting is still fear. Quiet expectation is faith, the settled knowledge that something has been set in motion in the spiritual realm that will manifest in the physical realm in divine timing. The 24-hour window. Many people ask, why 24 hours? Is this a promise? Is this guaranteed? Let me be honest with you, the 24-hour window is real, but it requires understanding. You will rarely see a miraculous bank transfer appear within 24 hours of reading a psalm. What typically happens within 24 hours is more subtle, and in some ways more significant. Within 24 hours, something changes internally. The frequency shifts, the weight lifts, the anxiety decreases, and with it, the mental and spiritual blockages that were preventing you from seeing and seizing the opportunities already around you. Within 24 hours, you may receive a phone call, a message, an idea, an invitation. Small seeds that, if you recognize and act on them, lead to the breakthrough. Within 24 hours, the spiritual atmosphere of your home changes. People who have done this, who have walked through their homes reading these psalms aloud with sincere faith, report a change in the feeling of the space. A heaviness lifts. There is a sense of hope that was not there before. And hope is not nothing. Hope is the beginning of every miracle. Within 24 hours, you yourself change, and that changed you, the you who expects provision, who knows your divine identity, who sees the table being prepared even while the enemies are watching, that you makes different decisions, that you speaks differently, that you carries yourself differently, and the world responds differently to that you than it did to the you who walked in fear and scarcity. The breakthrough begins in 24 hours. It continues and builds as you continue to live in alignment with what you have declared. This is not a one-time magic trick. This is the beginning of a new way of being. Testimonies across the ages. The use of Psalm 23 for protection from poverty and lack is not a modern internet invention. It is ancient practice. In Jewish communities throughout the centuries of diaspora, communities that faced legal exclusion from land ownership, from many professions, from civic life, that were subjected to pogroms and persecution and the constant threat of losing everything, the Psalms were a lifeline, not just emotionally, spiritually, and practically. Business owners would recite specific psalms before opening their shops. Mothers would speak them over their families on Shabbat. Travelers would recite them before journeys that would take them into economically hostile territory. In the African American spiritual tradition, the Psalms, especially Psalm 23 and Psalm 91, were central tools of spiritual resistance during slavery and in its aftermath. These were people with no material power, no legal rights, no financial resources. And yet they used these words to maintain spiritual dignity, to create a frequency of divine covering that sustained them through conditions that should have destroyed them. The tradition of singing the 23rd Psalm at funerals is not just about comfort for the dead, it is a declaration over the living. Even in this valley, even in this darkness, we do not walk alone, and we do not remain here. In West African spiritual traditions, particularly in Yoruba practice and in its diaspora expressions in Brazil, Cuba, and Haiti, the concept of the sacred spoken word as a tool for material transformation is foundational. The oriki, praise poetry that functions similarly to the Psalms, are used to call forth divine provision, to remove spiritual obstacles, to align the individual with their divine destiny of flourishing. Different tradition, same eternal truth. The spoken sacred word, delivered with faith and intention, moves mountains in the invisible world, and those moved mountains eventually show up as changed circumstances in the visible one. A word about generational poverty. If you have been watching financial struggle repeat in your family across generations, if your parents struggled and their parents before them, and the pattern seems to grip your household like something beyond bad luck, I want to speak directly to that. Generational poverty is real as an economic and social phenomenon. Systemic barriers, lack of access to capital and education, the long shadow of historical injustice, these are all real factors that must be confronted with real-world action, with policy change, with economic equity and justice. Never use spiritual practice as a substitute for demanding the structural changes that justice requires. But there is also a spiritual dimension to generational poverty that the ancient traditions all recognize. Patterns of lack can become embedded in a family's spiritual identity, in what its members believe about themselves, about money, about whether they are the kind of people to whom abundance belongs. These beliefs pass from parent to child, not through explicit teaching but through energy, through atmosphere, through the frequency of the home. Children absorb the scarcity consciousness of their parents the way they absorb language, naturally, invisibly, completely. The Psalms, read with the specific intention of breaking generational poverty, are a spiritual intervention into this cycle. When you read them with that intention, you are not just working on your own consciousness. You are standing in the gap for your family line. You are saying the pattern stops here, in me, in this generation. This home will have a different frequency than the home I grew up in. My children will grow up in an atmosphere of provision and possibility, and that atmosphere will shape their subconscious minds and their spiritual identities in a completely different direction. This is profound work, and it begins with one reading, done with sincerity, done with understanding, done with the full weight of your heart behind every word. Final reflection. The Psalm is a mirror. I want to close with this thought. The Psalms do not change God. God is not moved by incantations. The Psalms change you. They are a mirror that shows you who you truly are at the deepest level. Not a person of lack, not a victim of circumstance, not someone for whom abundance is someone else's story. They show you a person covered, guided, seated at a prepared table, anointed, overflowing. And when you see yourself clearly in that mirror, when the image in the mirror becomes more real to you than the fear in the bank statement, that is when the material world begins to rearrange itself to match what you know to be true. Read Psalm 23. Read it slowly. Read it out loud. Read it with your whole heart. Let every verse wash over your home and your life, like water over dry ground. Then read Psalm 91. Then Psalm 128. Seal it with gratitude. Declare abundance over your home. And then watch, with the eyes of faith, which is simply the confident expectation of what has been promised, watch what begins to move in your life within the next 24 hours. The Lord is your shepherd, and you shall not want, not today, not tomorrow, not ever again. Go in peace, go in provision, go in the certain knowledge that the table is already being set.